a supplier in Mexico that I wanted to use. And I think we'd spoken briefly about this, and that's a story that maybe is worth sharing here.
Absolutely. Share away.
So this guy, I can't even now looking back, like I don't even remember how I found him. So and maybe it's worth saying. So like the Chinese supplier, like I had a video call with them. I mean, when I started this process, China was still very much locked down due to COVID, and so we had a video call. He like showed me his factory, his people. So I was like, okay, they actually are making shoes at this place. And I think I sent him a couple $100, or I sent him like $500 the first time, and that was for a couple samples where they 3D print the sole of the shoe. So it's not actually the shoe that you will have that you'll wear on a court, but it's just to show you this is exactly what it will look like. But the first mold so we did a size 9.5 mold that was going to be the one that I was going to test drive. And I sent him $4,500 I wired to China. And that was a tough day because I still had not been there. I didn't know this. I mean, I'd been talking to him for a couple of years, but it was like, I did that knowing like I might be out $5,000, you know, like there's some chance that I've just been long con defrauded by this guy that wants to take $5,000 from me, you know?
All right, Tyler, every entrepreneur has that light bulb moment, right? What was that light bulb moment for Montis Pickleball?
Okay. So the specific moment where sort of the genesis of the idea, it was born and I said, I'm going to do this, was in November of 2021. And I was with my now wife, then girlfriend, soon to be fiance at the time. And we were driving to go buy a new pair of shoes for me to play pickleball in. She is an actress. She's does a lot of musical theater, and she had a role at the time. She had back-to-back roles, so she was sort of busy every night from 6 to 10 p.m. She was just gone, and so I had started playing a crazy amount of pickleball because this, serious relationship that I had was, kind of a after 11 p.m. or before 6 p.m. situation for a while, and so I was. Finish work and I'd say, all right, I guess I'll go play pickleball. And I'd gotten into it, and I knew how to buy court shoes because I played competitive tennis growing up. And my wife and I went to like a Foot Locker. We went to a Famous Footwear. We went to this local sports store called Sports.End. And nobody had a pickleball shoe. Nobody had a pickleball shoe. I wasn't even looking for a pickleball shoe specifically because I didn't think one existed. Nobody had a court shoe. Nobody had a tennis shoe. And what I found when I started asking, like I asked some of the guy at the Foot Locker, I'm like, don't you guys are Famous Footwear, like, why don't you have like a tennis shoe? Don't people need court shoes to play tennis? And what the guy said to me was, they used to carry them. And what's happened over the last sort of 5 to 10 years is all the big brands and all the big retailers have shifted to their lifestyle shoes. So it's like these Nikes I'm wearing right now. It's just, this is not a functional performance shoe. It's comfortable. It's cool. I wear it kind of a daily shoe to walk around in or go to work or whatever, but I can't play, if I try to play pickleball in that shoe, I'm going to roll my ankle and ruin the shoe in about an hour.
Absolutely.
But the big brands and the retailers they get really high margins because this shoe is really cheap to produce and they sell it for whatever, they can sell it for $200+ a pair. And so they get great margins on that product. And so they've all leaned into those. And the court shoes are actually pretty difficult within footwear in general. Tennis court or pickleball court shoes are relatively difficult, relatively expensive because you have to use a dense rubber compound in the sole of the shoe, and that's expensive. So the guy explained to me that they get better margins, so they've leaned into lifestyle shoes. They don't have them anymore. And so after my wife and I had been to we literally went to 4 different stores, and I couldn't find a pair of shoes to buy. And I think we went to like a Dick's. And in the Dick's Sporting Goods, they had one pair of court shoes on the wall, and it was like a $50 pair of the crappiest. I don't even remember that. I think it was New Balance or one of the big brands, but it was like the cheapest bottom of the barrel shoe that you could find. And so you could find at the time, you could find tennis shoes in like specialty tennis stores or in online anywhere, obviously. And so I was driving in the car with my now wife on I-215 here in Salt Lake City, and I looked at her and I said, I'm going to start a pickleball shoe company. And immediately in my mind, what came to mind was we're gonna name the company Juice, and it's gonna be like black with like electric, like neon green are gonna be kind of the colors. And that was like that was the actual light bulb moment. Was like, this is what I'm gonna do. Obviously, fast forward down the road, we didn't end up being Juice. Wilson owns the trademark to the name Juice in one of the trademark categories, not directly what would compete with footwear, but we said eventually we don't want to compete with them because they have tennis rackets and pickleball paddles called, the Juice, their Juice line of products. So anyways, there's a whole story there, but that was the light bulb moment of it was going to be Juice and it was going to be black and green. Our first shoe ended up being that black and green. And yeah, so that was the beginning of the journey in November of 2021.
Did you end up calling Wilson and saying, hey, how can you give us the right to this juice? Or did you immediately pivot?
Once we saw that, so we decided just to not bother because so the way it works with trademarking is apparel is one category. You can get a trademark in the apparel category, and sporting goods and equipment is a different category. So you could have the same name in two different categories. So technically, Juice was available in the apparel category with the USPTO. But we sort of said, hey, 10 years from now, if this works, we want to have the optionality to do paddles or balls or whatever it is, sporting goods category in the future, and not have to compete with someone that has the bankroll like a Wilson that's going to just hire a bunch of lawyers and make us change our name. So we said, let's try to find something that's a little more clear. And so we just moved on from there. We actually were then Maven for a while. It was going to be Mavn. Maven was going to be, that was sort of the second.
How was that?
Name. How was it? Or why
was that?
Oh,
yeah, why'd you go with Maven?
We just sort of liked it, and there was something about the word Maven. To be a Maven is sort of like to be a unique expert on some level at something, and someone who's like a proponent of something, and it sort of fits with pickleball in the way that so many pickleball players are it's sort of culty in the way that if you get into pickleball, you're like a gearhead for pickleball, and you're like, I'm going to be the one that tells you all about this and that and the paddle and gear. And so it just sort of seemed like it fit culturally with what pickleball is. And I actually own the rights to that intellectual property because we got it. But then we found a company called Maven Safety Shoes that's been around for a long time. They sell literally, it's like work boots, steel-toed boots and stuff, but they don't own any trademarks. They don't actually own the intellectual property, but they've been around for 7 or 8 years. And so, I don't know, researched it and the way it all works. And it's like, you're still kind of exposed if they can come back and say, hey, we've been a legitimate business for a really long time. And we reached out to them to try and have some sort of a coexistence agreement, never heard back. And so we just sort of said, well, let's just do something different again, find something that's just really free and clear.
So how'd you get to Montis?
And Montis was then the funny thing about that is, and on the topic of fail first or sort of fail, whatever you want to call it, fail into stuff, fail forward. Yeah. We already had paid the attorney to trademark our logo. That was the M with the hexagonal thing, and that was going to be for Maven. And so we said, okay, well, let's see if we can come up with a name that starts with an M that we like, that this sort of fits for. So, I mean, it was as stupid as that, why we were looking in the direction of M names. But we're really, really happy it all turned out the way that it did, because we found Montis. I think I was, my dad and my brother and I were sort of brainstorming together, and I came up with Montis. And Montis means mountain in Latin, and there's two meanings. I'm sitting here speaking to you from Salt Lake City. We're our brand, our family were born in the Rocky Mountains. So mountain is sort of a meaningful, just paying homage to the roots of the brand Montis, but also in my mind, playing really great pickleball is kind of like being a mountain. You're big, you're looming, you're patient, you're in the way, nothing gets past you. You are a frustratingly difficult obstacle for your opponents to overcome. Like that's pickleball. More so than other sports where, maybe lightning speed in terms of like, basketball, whatever, hitting threes in transition or whatever you want to call it, just burning someone on a fly route in football. Uh, it's like pickleball is sort of a defense to offense sort of sport. And so
Absolutely.
mountain felt good for that, for those two meanings, Rocky Mountains and just really great performance pickleball, which speaks to what we were trying to do with the product.
I absolutely love that. Absolutely love it. I think that when there's meaning behind the name, I think it just like fills your cup that much more and just gives you that much more energy to keep taking action. With the
Yeah.
element of taking action. So you go from idea to now needing to execute on an entire business. What was the first step that you had to take, that first action after you were like, you know what? I'm building this pickleball shoe company. Here's the first thing I got to execute on.
Well, uh, I had to figure out how to get a product and how to make a good product. So I
Right.
guess I simultaneously started thinking about what do I want in a pickleball shoe? What does a good pickleball shoe look like? A shoe specifically designed for the movements of feet in pickleball. And B, how do I find one? How do I make one? Who knows how to make a shoe? I didn't know the first thing about footwear. Um, I've always been a bit particular about having the correct footwear for my feet. I remember once playing basketball with some friends and I didn't have basketball shoes with me or any sort of ankle support or lateral support shoe. I was wearing some Adidas, I think it's Adidas Ultra Boost running shoes. And it's a 100% like stretchy mesh upper. And that shoe is designed for running straight in a line in a marathon sort of thing. And so you can't like play defense in basketball. You're trying to like get down in front of someone and move side to side, and it's like your foot's sliding off the edges of the shoe. And I remember just being really complaining, like, this sucks. And my friends were making fun of me, like, dude, just play. And I'm like, I can't play in these shoes. It's not the right footwear for this activity. And that was sort of the first time that I realized, like, maybe I'm a little particular about having the right footwear for the right activity. And um, anyway, so that's maybe a bit about where my headspace was with it, but I had no idea how to manufacture shoes. Um, and so I started thinking about what do I want in a shoe, and then I just got to work on the internet, Googling, YouTubing, watching everything I could find that talked about footwear manufacturing, and also like everything I could find about like how to find a manufacturer. I posted on some like blogs, um, and was like, "Hey, I'm a U.S." And I sort of like the idea in business of the not in a well. I guess you can take it a little too far with the Elizabeth Holmes sort of situation, but the fake it till you make it sort of thing. You don't want to fake it like her. But I was posting things like, "Hey, I'm a U.S. company looking for a supplier for this or whatever," and it was like, yeah, the U.S. company was me and an LLC that I made. It was like maybe representing that I was more legit than I was at the time for sure. But
You gotta.
you gotta. I mean, if that's where I was headed, I knew I was going to do it. But yeah,
I'll tell you a small secret, not to cut you off,
no,
but
go for it, please.
the reason for the fail first project that I list co-founder and not just founder is because it looks like it's a group of people or more than one person that is invested in this company. Rather than often, if you just list founder, it's like it's just one guy behind the scenes, maybe it's just him trying to find his way. But co-founder sounds legit because that's a group of people, right?
There's an
So
investment group backing this enterprise.
exactly. So nobody hold that against me. You now know my secrets, but I completely get it. Absolutely
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. Um, and so I guess from there we found. I mean, I went and for a while it was just nothing happened. I mean, there's a couple months where it was like I don't know how to find a person that does this, and I talked to a couple friends of friends and acquaintances of friends that have connections to the footwear industry, so I could kind of ask them, how what they thought I should do and how I should to approach this. But ultimately, I found a guy in China. Actually, he saw something I posted on a blog for like Chinese footwear manufacturers, and he reached out to me. Um, and I started kind of going down the line with him of like, this is what I want. We had a couple phone calls about this is how we're trying to do. We're trying to build this company, blah blah blah. They didn't know what pickleball was, and so I showed them some videos, and I'm like, this is blowing up, and now it's actually gotten a lot bigger. Obviously, in China and like India, a lot of Asian countries are starting to see similar growth to what the U.S. was 5 years ago. But um, I had to like explain what they were doing. So they did a bunch of research on their end, and then they came back and were like, "Oh, this is exciting! Like, yeah, you could be pickleball shoes." And it's actually funny. So the guy that's my point of contact with this manufacturer is Chilean. Actually, he's a Chilean guy that lives in China. He's married to a Chinese lady. Um, and I actually I spent a couple of years living in Chile and speak fluent Spanish. And so that was actually very helpful with the communication between he and I. It's like in English, and when we need to fill in the blanks, it's in Spanish. And, my Spanish is maybe as good as his English or vice versa. And so we hopefully can get into the weeds of
Yeah.
that a little bit, which was kind of a serendipitous thing. Um, and so we started down the road of, okay, well, this is what I want in a shoe. I showed him some examples of other companies' products that said, okay, I like this feature from that shoe, I like that feature from this shoe, and this is what I want, this is what pickleball needs. And so then they kind of came up with a prototype, they sent it to me, I tested it, mixed around, said I don't like this, I do like that, sent it back, and we went back and forth like that for a couple of years, really. Until we had a shoe that we were ready to launch. And so they're the
Mm.
manufacturer that we ended up going with. I don't know if you want to go there now, but during that 2 year stretch, I also found a supplier in Mexico that I wanted to use. And I think we'd spoken
Okay.
briefly about this, and that's
Yeah.
a story that maybe is worth sharing here. Um,
Absolutely. Share away.
so uh, this guy, he I can't even now looking back, like I don't even remember how I found him. Like I think it was probably just another internet thing. So and maybe it's worth saying. So like the Chinese supplier, like I had a video call with them. I mean, when I started this process, China was still very much locked down due to COVID,
Mm.
and so we had a video call. He like showed me his factory, his people. So I was like, okay, they actually are making shoes at this place. Um, and I think I sent him a couple $100, or I sent him like $500 the first time, and that was for a couple samples where they 3D print the sole of the shoe. So it's not actually the shoe that you will have that you'll wear on a court, but it just to show you this is exactly what it will look like. And then when you're ready to actually manufacture the shoe with the rubber compound, it was a $5,000 investment basically, and that was
Just
the
for the
day
mold.
just
The
to make the
mold.
injection molds for the
Yeah.
sole of the shoe. The upper is fairly easy. It's just, I mean, that's cloth. They mass produce it, they cut it with machines, and then they stitch it all up together. But the sole of the shoe is 100% custom, and for every size that you make, you have to custom invest in an injection mold. And so if you have, I've got like 20 sizes. If you have 20 sizes, you got to make 20 different molds. But the first mold we meant, so we did a size 9.5 mold that was going to be the one that I was going to test drive, and I sent him $4,500 I wired to China, and that was a tough day because I still had not been there. I didn't know this. I mean, I'd been talking to him for a couple of years, but it was like I did that knowing like I might be out $5,000. You know, like there's some chance that I've just been long con defrauded by this guy that wants to take $5,000 from me. You know, um, but I mean, I felt pretty good about it because I had some evidence. I mean, they'd sent me a bunch of different samples, and it was good quality. The samples were good. So shifting back to the Mexico, I
Yeah.
simultaneously was working with this guy in Mexico, and it was a 6 or a year behind the China progress. So I kind of by this time, at least with the Mexico guy, I had some sense of what to expect, like how it could work in the process of like making a sample, figuring it out. And I sent this guy $800 in Mexico, and because he said, "All right, I'll make you a sample," and I think I sent him a pair of shoes too, which in and of itself was a nightmare. Sending a pair of There's a weird law
Why?
between customs between
What the
Mexico and
fuck
the
happened?
US.
Yeah.
If you're sending a product from the US to Mexico that is apparel and it's not like brand new, like from the manufacturer or like in the original packaging and all that, it will get they won't let it through. Like the Mexican customs will confiscate it, and it has to do with like the anti kind of dumping laws. So they don't want us to go take all our stuff from the Goodwill here and just go dump it off in Mexico and sell it to Mexicans and hurt Mexican businesses by doing it. So I get why the law exists, but I was trying to send a single pair of shoes, or I think I was trying to send one shoe just so he could see like the upper and test the sample and make sure it was the right rubber compound. And it was used. It wasn't like totally dead or anything, but it was a shoe that had been like worn a couple times. And it was like it took me 3 tries to get through Mexican customs. I kept like tagging it. This is a sample for a manufacturer, like, and they just kept confiscating it at the border. But so he gets my shoe, he gets my $800, and he says, "Great, I'll do it for you." And a month went by, a couple months went by, and I hear back from him, and he sends me some pictures. And it's like by that time, the Chinese manufacturers had sent me samples. It was like really great samples. This guy sent me some pictures of like, "Oh, look what I'm doing," and it's like, okay, you have a piece of black cloth, and it's like I can't really like. There's no evidence that you've actually done anything for me except that you put something in that looks like maybe it's the same color as the shoe I sent you.
Yeah.
And he kind of did stuff like that. He would send me weird, like, "Yeah, look at this. It's great. I'm almost done." And then one day, finally, I'm like, "Dude, it's been like 4 months. Like, do you have anything for me? Like, what's going on?" He was in Monterrey, and the footwear hub of Mexico is in Leon. That's where all the footwear manufacturing happens. They mostly
Okay.
do leather products in Mexico. It's not a lot of athletic footwear. It's mostly like leather shoes, boots, and stuff. But this guy, he said, "Oh, I had to go to Leon. I had to go to Leon again. I have to travel to Leon." And finally, he says to me, like, "Okay, I'm almost done with your sample. I need $5,000 more dollars, and then I'll have it for you." And I was like, "Hold on, are you making an injection mold? Like, what do you mean $5,000? Like, I just make me a sample of the upper of the shoe. Show me what it's going to look like." And he was like, "No, well, I've incurred so many expenses. I had to go to Leon all this time. I had to do this, I had to do that, and this." And I'm like looking online, like I said, I lived in South America. I speak Spanish. I'm like, okay, so a bus ticket from Monterrey to Leon is 50 pesos. So I actually sent him this message because at this point I kind of knew like this guy's not legit, but he said,
Yeah.
"I got to go to Leon 3 more times and then I'll have your sample done, and it's very expensive." And I said, "Are you gonna stay at the Ritz Carlton? Like, what are you doing?" I literally said that to him. I was like, "It's 50 pesos for a bus ticket to Leon. It's a few hours, dude. Like, what do you think you're?" And he got mad and I got mad. And I was just like, "Dude, like, I'm not sending you a dime until you provide the sample that I already paid for." And he just never responded, and that was the end of it. So I failed pretty hard trying to find a manufacturer in Mexico the first time. Um, and that
Were you
was
just were
Go
you
ahead.
just doing that? Were you just doing that to kind of test the waters, see what was out there, and even compare quality of products?
Yes, I wanted to compare quality, see what I could get. I also I wanted to. I mean, I don't love having 100% of my supply coming from China in an
Mm.
environment where and especially at that time, it was still sort of in the wake of the first round of like Trump tariffs. And so now we've kind of got the second wave of those that are looming that I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like. And also, heaven forbid, but there is a non-zero chance of a serious conflict between the U.S. and China over Taiwan and the whole Taiwan issue. And so, I mean, I don't think that that's ever really going to come to head in the scope of like a war or anything, but it's possibility. And no matter how it develops, if I had 100% of my supply coming from China, I'd be in a rough position. So I wanted to just test the waters on like, okay, is it possible to find someone outside of China? The shipping from Mexico to the United States, you can do it via rail mostly, and it's actually fairly cheap, and you don't have any tariffs. And so although the labor component of the footwear manufacturing is a lot more expensive in Mexico, if you can find the quality, there's a lot of good reasons why it makes sense to do that. And so I'm still sort of, I've experimented. I don't want to have 100% of my supply coming from China, but I'm so small today, and man, the people that I'm working with in China are really sharp. Like 70%, this is a crazy stat, 70% of all athletic footwear in the United States is made in Fujian, China. So there are a lot of people in Fujian that know how to manufacture athletic footwear and know how to do it well. And it's so the expertise is a real barrier to finding options elsewhere. There's just not as many people that know how to do it in other countries.
So beyond cost, to kind of give us a reference for why beyond just shoes, so many things are manufactured in China beyond the US, why that's an alternative. I'm sure you kind of explored having it manufactured in the United States a little bit. Can you give us a reference on that difference that it would actually cost you as a manufacturer between producing it out of China and producing in the US?
Yeah. So the biggest component is the labor, right? So
Yeah.
with shoes, there's a lot of it that you can do with machinery. Basically, what they do is they cut all the pieces. They mass produce all the different pieces of the shoe, and they cut them with machines, and then they have them, and then they use sewing machines that a person is operating to stitch a lot of the rest of it together. And that sort of is how a lot of footwear is done. And that stitching, and part of that reason is because you're making so many different sizes of shoes. For every one colorway you want to make, you got to make 20 different sizes. And so it's just not easy to automate all the steps in that chain, because again, every type of shoe you want to make, you got to make 20 different SKUs within one shoe. So it's that labor is the real difficult cost. And so if I would, the labor component of the cost is, I don't know, I mean, it's probably at least a third or half of the total cost of manufacturing the shoe. And if I were to do that if I were to do it in Mexico, that component is probably going to be 3 times what it is in China. And if I did it in the US, it'd probably be 10 times what it is in China, that proportion of the cost, or that component of the cost. So I actually am really intrigued now, especially in light of the tax cuts that Trump is proposing for domestic manufacturers. So if you think about it this way, I pay a 27.5% tariff on shoes that I make in China. Just to bring them into the United States, I pay 27.5% on top of whatever the cost of that shoe was. If with what Trump is proposing, he's proposing taking that up to 60% and dropping the my income tax rate for the business from 24% to 15%. So who knows if he really will get those things, if those things come to fruition. But if they did, okay, so 60% increase in my cost goes away, and and now 9% of my net income for my business also gets handed back to me in a tax break. It might, and you save on the shipping if you're producing locally, then closer to your warehousing and distribution. Then there's also cost savings. So it might be the case that all those different sources of cost savings are enough to offset um, the savings that I get by outsourcing the labor to a place like China. But the real hurdle is I don't I don't know a single person. I can't find anyone in the United States that knows how to manufacture shoes. It's just
I
like
was just gonna
I don't
ask
know
you
if
that,
they
like,
exist.
would it
Like
be
I'm
a
sure
sign it
someone
would
does, but
yeah, like, would it be a significant, decline in the quality of the shoes? Because they've been doing them for so long over there for many US manufacturers.
yeah, I think there's a reasonable likelihood of that. I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, if someone ever sees this and they're like, I'm an expert shoe manufacturer, like come find me, because I love the idea of setting up an operation. I mean, obviously there would be massive barriers, huge fixed investments here, right? If I was going to set up a warehouse somewhere outside Salt Lake City, Utah, and set up a manufacturing hub and try to hire people and whatever, like, I mean, that would be massive upfront investment. I think it's intriguing because of everything I mentioned. It at some point could be worth it for the cost savings, but I mean, I think at this point, from what I know, it's like, I think I would just have to go spend a year living in China, working in a shoe factory, and then come back and do it myself. Like, I don't know. I don't know where I would even begin, because everyone I've ever met in the US who's somewhere in the shoe business, in the shoe manufacturing world, is just a person that has connections to a bunch of other countries. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's one somewhere, but I mean, I've Googled around and maybe I've Googled the wrong things, but I don't know if it even exists.
So the reason that I'm curious about that, so my background is aerospace manufacturing. So when I'm thinking and breaking this down, the gap that a lot of people even miss when it comes to, let's say you were opening up your own facility, right? When you bring in all that machinery, the next step is not only bringing the machinery in, but making that process efficient. So something that they talk about over Toyota, right, established this. It's Kaizen. We've adapted it to be called lean manufacturing. It's that efficiency of processes and eliminating waste. They are experts at that. So the reason that they can usually sell manufactured product at such a reduced cost is one big pillar of that. They're damn efficient at how they're producing it. There's no waste in their system. So usually the problem when we come to the US is like we slap a bunch of machines in a facility, but don't necessarily align them up properly, or
Totally.
even put them in a manner where an operator could run multiple machines at one time. So over there, they have an operator, let's say in your situation, they're stitching the toe on one side, they're flipping around 360 to the start of the process and then also detailing the sole. So like they become so efficient in that process that they're doubling down on every operation. They're reducing that overhead to half or one third of what we would do it for. So to your point, it doesn't make any sense for you as a business from an actual operating cost standpoint. It doesn't make any sense, right? And then two, from a quality standpoint, it also doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So the incentives need to significantly, as you just talked about, significantly outweigh those downsides in order for us to start bringing things to the United States. But I at least wanted you to communicate that from like a person sitting in your shoes that just started a company on what it looks like and why you're outsourcing it in the first place.
Totally. And the other thing I would just add to what you said is
Yeah.
there's a difference between manufacturing a few thousand pairs of shoes and a few million pairs of shoes. Like,
Absolutely.
I actually think I could probably figure out how to set up an operation and manufacture a couple thousand pairs. Like, I could figure that out. I could do a lot of it myself. I could, but it's like, if my business is really going to grow, like, 1,000 turns to 10,000 turns to 100,000 turns to a million turns to 10 million. And it's like, yeah, there's people over there, but it's like, no sweat, 10 million pairs, great. And it's like, if I Jimmy rigged an operation and hustled and figured out how to make 10,000 pairs of shoes a year here, it's like, I would still not even be, I mean, the scale is like mind boggling to a certain point, right? Like, where it's like, I would need millions of dollars of upfront investment to even think about doing quantities to the level that like I'm hoping my business will be selling someday.
Mm, absolutely. And to that point, like the reason that they could do millions in volume is because and still keep their prices relatively low is because every single piece of their process doesn't have downtime. Like they're in there and they're working the entire time because there's no like, hey, the operator needs to walk across the floor to grab new material and then bring it back to their spot and then stitch it up. It's like that material is coming in the door, out right in front of you for you to stitch without you taking any steps, right?
Totally.
So a question that I do have though in all of this, we just talked about the like what the fuck happened in Mexico, right? As well as navigating China, but doing this from like an entrepreneurship lens or like a new lens, like what made you take that risk in the first place? Because most people can't get over that hurdle.
Yeah, man. It's so that's probably a difficult question to answer, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is I love pickleball. Like I mean, I just, I'm not ever, I'm not like semi-pro or pro or trying to pursue it on that level, but it's like I play at least a few times a week. I'm like 5'1" kind of duper level, and I just freaking love it. And so being in pickleball is really fun for me. So that is the thing that I think is maybe the most important because it sort of just allows for me to like most of what I do, although so much of what I've done with the shoes business is just one gigantic headache and it's going to driving me to an early grave and turning my hair gray. But it's also like I enjoy it, like along the way, it's like fun being in pickleball and having an excuse to play more hours of pickleball and have my shoes out there and that sort of thing. So that I think is maybe the baseline first thing. But then I think in terms of like my personal experience that led to the decision to be able to like stick with it and get this thing off the ground, a lot of it I think it's just kind of a long time coming, a few different factors in my life. So my parents were entrepreneurs. My I'm the youngest of five boys, so I have four older brothers, and my parents founded Golden Swirl frozen yogurt in Utah. So they were kind of the first people to bring frozen yogurt as a thing to like the kind of Rocky Mountain area. They like they built that business, and when they started doing it, people were like, what is it? Like it's frozen yogurt, like it's yogurt, and it's like, but it's kind of like ice cream. What it's just this funny thing. So in the 80s and 90s, they sold the company in 1997, I think, when or 99 maybe. I think I don't know, one of those 98, 97, 99. The end of the decade when I was like 5 years old. So I never really was like a part of it. My oldest brother, like him and his buddies were like working in the stores and screwing around. And my parents, they had a bunch of kiosks in the Delta Center during the peak, like Stockton Malone jazz days. And so because of that sponsorship, they had like 8 lower bowl season tickets. And so my older brothers and their friends were like going to the playoff basketball games, the Stockton Malone era, which I've always been a little jealous of. Like that was a good time to be a Jazz fan.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, so that was like fun, but I was young when they sold it, but my parents have always been entrepreneurs. My dad, and that really, it's the story starts with him that he has always been interested in entrepreneurship, and he wanted to build his when he was in college, and then he did an MBA and a PhD, and he wanted to build this PhD program around entrepreneurship and studying entrepreneurs. But at this time in like the 70s, they entrepreneurship programs at universities like didn't exist. Like it wasn't a thing you could study. So he studied organizational behavior and kind of tailored it in a way that was the closest thing he could find. Um, and I guess my point is my dad went straight from his PhD into teaching in like MBA courses about entrepreneurship and related topics. And his first instinct was like, what in the world am I doing? Like, I can't teach these people anything. I've never done anything. I've just been in school my whole life. So that's when he like decided I'm going to do it. And he and my mom launched Golden Swirl, and he started his own business. They built it for 10 years and then they sold the company. And they had, I don't know, I think they had 80 stores throughout the Utah, Colorado, Nevada, Wyoming, when they sold it. And so they were quite successful with it. And then he sort of went back into academia, but this time, I mean, he's done some consulting, but he's studied entrepreneurship, and he's continued to study entrepreneurs. And fast forward now, he's the director of the Entrepreneurship Center at Utah State University. And he and my brother Jay, and the reason this is all relevant is because I am in business together with the two of them in this venture with the pickleball shoes that I'm doing. So he and my brother Jay launched a company called My New Enterprise, and basically what it's like an ed tech. They build educational training programs for companies, and a lot of what they do is focused on entrepreneurship. And so they've used my dad's research and the whole body of research that he's done in his career. They have, hundreds of entrepreneurs that they've gone and sat down and interviewed and heard their stories. How did you start your business? How are you successful? And they sort of put together, well, okay, all the ones that have been successful, these are the things they have in common. So this is what you should kind of focus on if you're starting your own business. And they sell that content as like a minor to universities. And then they have some other people that buy training programs of that nature from them. So the two of them have spent the last decade building that business. And so that was the context that I sort of grew up in and came to. I'm playing pickleball. I love this. I want to launch this business. And then I sort of teamed up with my brother and my dad. And so I'm the majority owner in Montis, and then their company is the minority owner of Montis Pickleball. And we sort of have a partnership between the three of us. And my brother and I are running all the day to day. But anyway, sorry, that's a long-winded answer. You'll find that's how I am. I'll try to cut it back, but that's sort of the context for my entrepreneurial journey.
That's perfect. And I think everybody else is thinking the same thing that I am, which is give us a sneak peek into this. What are like the one or two things that your father and your brother along this journey have found are consistent with successful entrepreneurs?
So yeah, let's see what I can remember off the top of my head. So he published a book called Main Street Entrepreneur,
Okay.
that is sort of the summary of, well, that's a whole shtick he did. He rode his bike across the country from Oregon to Virginia.
Wow.
I guess they just did it again, but so he's done it twice now. But it was 10 years ago. And what they did is they stopped in small towns along the way and interviewed entrepreneurs, people that started these businesses. So what my dad is really passionate about is, most business schools, when they teach business, they teach here's how you build a platform. And I'm just going to spit buzzwords because that's what they do. Platform with AI that can scale and mass marketing, and you can have lower your CAC and raise your LTV, and then you do your series seed round, and then your series A, and then your series B, and then you exit and you make $1 billion. Like that's how people think about business and teach business. But
can't wait to clip that.
the vast majority of businesses that people start is, I'm going to provide a livelihood for myself and my family and a few other people that are going to be employed by me, and they're small. And so that's why the book is called Main Street Entrepreneur, because it's the Main Street, not Wall Street of the world. And so they were interviewing people in like small towns along the way of this bike ride, and so they have this amazing library of footage of like, just, you can hear people tell their stories about their businesses, and this is what I do, and there's all sorts of unique things. But to answer your question directly, I don't remember all the, I think there's 9 things specifically, but
Okay.
Here's off the top of my head. So it's things like, I can't remember exactly the language he uses on this one, but people make use of, without making a financial investment, they make really good use of the resources around them. So he talks about building a brain trust. So have some experienced people all around you that know what they're doing in the space you're trying to do something in, that will talk to you about it for free and get their advice and get their opinions and talk to them about it. And he talks about they build their customers, they build a community of raving fans. So turn your customers into a raving fan, not just oh yeah, I tried this product, it's fine. It's you want your customer to be so wowed that they are a raving fan of your business. And man,
So
I wish.
crazy you said that. So I just I don't know when this episode is going to come out in reference, but I had a guy, Rob Zwemmer, on the podcast, and he is in a big real estate group out of California. And I asked him relatively a similar question, and I asked him to give the number one thing. And he turns around at his desk and pulls out this book. And guess what the book was called? Raving Fans.
Oh, okay.
I swear to God. So literally his number one advice was if you are a product or service, to create raving fans around your product or service. Because his big thing was the goodwill that compounds from that, of one person telling another person, telling another person, and before you know it, so many people have gotten great reviews on your product. That is why people come, and that's why they stay, is because that trust that they got from somebody else, that it's a high quality product. Absolutely. So I absolutely love that you said that.
Yeah.
So
okay. So yeah, it's 9. It is 9. I found them. Anyways, you can go look them up. But yeah, 9 things, and that's that sort of thing.
if people wanted to go find that, where can they find it?
Well, I'm on
Your dad's
Amazon. Stuff. Well, yeah.
Okay.
So their website is just mynewenterprise.com. But that doesn't have the exact same thing as the book. The book is on Amazon. It's called Main Street Entrepreneur, and there has these kind of 9 points. But it's an easy read. You know, my dad, despite being in academia his whole life, the book is not like big academic lingo. It's just him talking like, this is what we did, and here's things we found in common. It's a really readable book, which I thought was great. But, so there's a plug. I wasn't planning on pitching my dad's book, but I guess there we go.
There's something to be said about the fact of, and I think Elon Musk was the one who said this, of like, you truly know information if you can explain it to a 5-year-old, right? And that's where it's so easily digestible, right? It's so easy to read new information and get lost in the lingo. So the fact that your father did that, 1, I can't wait to go read it. And then 2, I might have to text and be like, hey, can I get on the phone with your father to talk through some of these things and pick his brain?
Yeah, I'm sure he'd love to chat with you. He's always easy about that stuff. So
for you though, so you were in a position where you now started Montis Pickleball. Was this your first venture as an entrepreneur, or what was your background that kind of led to this point?
So I mean, this was not my first venture as an entrepreneur. This is my first real venture as an entrepreneur, you might say, depending on what your threshold for the word real is. But so let me tell you 2 stories. One, again, with the context of, I have this background of my dad has been talking my ear off about entrepreneurship my whole life and how he thinks starting business is really cool. And again, it's not even necessarily that my dad is like, you know, build equity and have a huge exit and you'll be a mega billionaire and then you'll have FU money. It's like my dad just is passionate about entrepreneurship and he's always talking about it and like, go build something, and he gets energized by that. So that's the context I grew up in, and I've always sort of loved the idea of this. So I loved Warcraft 3, the game growing up. I don't know if you it's a real-time strategy game, not World of Warcraft. It's the original one that it was based on. So it's a video game where you have to like make an economy and then you build an army and go fight, you know. But I was always like, I loved the build the economy piece of it. It was like, okay, so if I'm mining from this gold mine and then I mine from another gold mine and then I mine from another gold mine, then I can build a bigger army later. You know, it was like kind of this, like, as a 12-year-old kid or whatever, that was the way my brain always sort of geared, and I love that sort of thing. So the 2 stories I want to tell you. First, there's a McDonald's on the corner of a couple of streets in between my junior high and my parents' house. So every day walking to and from school, my friends and I would walk past this McDonald's. And on the way home from school, it was always like we go through McDonald's and somebody wants to buy a drink, or somebody wants to get a McDouble, or whatever it was. Somebody wants some nugs, and I sometimes would have money, and people would say, spot me a buck, I'll pay you back, buck, I'll pay you back later, I'll give you back $1.50, just let me do this or whatever. I realized that I could buy my friends McDonald's and then have them pay me back more, and then I'd be like making money, and I this is my 13-year-old brain realizing I could be a bank. I can make micro loans to my friends. And so there's this pocket in my backpack. At the top of my backpack, it was a zipper pocket, and it was about like, yay size. And I dumped a bunch of change into it. Quarters, pennies, nickels and dimes, maybe a couple dollar bills. And that was my bank. And so every day we'd go to McDonald's, and I would, any of my friends that wanted McDonald's, I'd be like, I'll buy it, but you got to pay me back. I'll give you $1, but you got to pay me back $1.25 or what. I'm charging exorbitant interest rates, to my friends. And I mean, I think it was relatively short-lived, but that was sort of one story that like, I just sort of had this like, hey, if I do this, then I'll end up with more money later on, And so that was kind of a fun thing. Never had a name, never formalized the business, never had an LLC, but that was the beginning maybe. And then the second one that was a bit more legit is so it gets really snowy in the winter here, obviously in Salt Lake City, gets icy on people's, and you're required by local law to shovel your sidewalk so that it's clear, so that people can walk. And you have to clear it, so you have to shovel it. But if you don't shovel it fast enough, it's icy, and so it's really slippery, and it's actually like a liability thing, right? So if somebody slips on your sidewalk that you haven't properly cleared and breaks their leg, it's like, we live in a litigious world where you could get sued for that. So anyways, point being, everybody's got ice melt. But I had this idea. I think it was actually in part driven by my mom originally. My mom, is a 105-pound woman, and they sell these bags of ice melt in bags of like 50 pounds, 50, 25, 30-pound bag. I mean, they're really big, heavy bags and boxes. So I started a company. It was basically, I was selling, it was an ice melt delivery service. So you don't have to go to the grocery store and haul a big heavy box back by yourself. I just went door to door and signed people up, and then I would go deliver ice melt to them. And when they needed a new box, they just called me, and I'd go drop off another one. And I, at one point, hired a couple of friends where, I think I was paying $11 a box for these boxes, and I was selling them for 20. And I think I told my friends, hey, every box you sell, I'll give you $5 or something like that. So my friends had some territories, and I had a territory. This is when I had my license. I guess I must have been 16, because I would go pick up the ice melt from the whatever warehouse they had it here, and bring it to my house and have just pallets of it in my parents' backyard. I made a few $1,000s. Yeah. I made a few $1,000, doing that a couple winters. So it was called Viking Ice Melt. And that was probably the first entrepreneurial venture that I really had.
And you at the time were not necessarily realizing that you were applying some entrepreneurship principles, so to speak, but you were just doing from the environment that you were learning in.
I was just trying to make money and having some fun. Yeah.
So really the big question was, how can I make money doing this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that piece of it was always sort of, I don't know, intuitive, or I wanted to do it. It was fun. It's energizing to me.
So with Montis Pickleball, and with many entrepreneurs, we all have our setbacks, right? What was that first defining failure or setback that you have had to navigate with Montis Pickleball?
So there's an obvious one. I think during that period, we already talked about the Mexico thing. That was really discouraging.
I was going to say beyond Mexico.
Beyond the Mexico thing. During the period of time when I was getting just going through the layers of samples of the shoes, it just took so long. I mean, it was 2.5 years before I was in the market with a product.
Wow.
And there was a lot of times during that stretch where it was like, I don't know if I'm still doing this or not. Like, it was just sort of like, this is really discouraging. It takes so long. The sample's not good enough, this, that, and during that time I watched Cypher Pickleball launched a pickleball shoe, Winner's Edge launched a pickleball shoe, Babolat launched a pickleball shoe, New Balance launched a pickleball shoe, Nike launched. I mean, it was like all the big brands that didn't have a product entered during the amount of time when I was sort of just trying to get my product to market, because there wasn't any when I had the idea. Nobody was in the market yet, but everybody ended up in the market right around the same time I did. So that was discouraging, but those were all sort of just like little this, that. The one big thing that has just been the headache that keeps on kicking was so our second shipment we did our first shipment from the manufacturer. It was great. I think it was a couple thousand pairs of shoes. Our second shipment from the manufacturer was like 3,000 pairs of shoes at 2,500, I think. And they had a problem. They didn't glue the shoes correctly. So there's a glue component. So you have the stitching, and then there's a component where they glue the sole to the midsole around the edges. And we started to find.
Would that basically be the injected mold piece attaching to the bottom of the rest of the shoe?
Exactly. That's exactly correct. Yeah. So it's like that actual like rubber outsole being glued onto the midsole that's already the midsole that is stitched to the upper. And after we were stoked. I mean, we had these shoes in the market. We had an influencer that put us on the map. We had a couple new colorways and a full size range launched. So women's sizes, men's sizes, and we were stoked, and we were selling a lot of shoes. And all of a sudden we started to get some feedback. Hey, there's a separation issue here. The midsole is detaching from the outsole. And so right along the edges of the shoe, you started to see it started ripping. And I was testing the product as we went, and I found, one pair, I wore it, and after like a couple of weeks, I could start to see the edge tearing, And for a product that one of the key defining factors of my shoe has been, we want to build a shoe that is going to last longer or as long as anything else in the market in terms of the durability of the sole of the shoe. Nobody cares about the durability of your sole if it detaches from the midsole. And so that was a real problem. We had, and we think it was probably about 25% of those shoes that were impacted, maybe even more, might have been 50, but because we don't know how many people got a pair of shoes, wore them a few times. They're like, this shoe sucks, threw it away, and we never heard back from them, So when we realized the extent of the problem, I mean, I had some really angry, difficult conversations with our supplier, who then in turn had some really angry, difficult conversations with their team. And we sent out on 2 different occasions, we sent out mass blast emails to all of our customers that had purchased between certain dates. So we knew it was from that second shipment. And we just said, hey, like, our commitment to quality is as good as it ever has been. We've become aware of this issue. If you got a pair of shoes that you think have been impacted by this, like, let us know. We are going to replace it for you for free. And we did that, and we are still doing that. We're pretty much all cycled through. Like, I don't have any more shoes in inventory from the second order now, I think. But I mean, the whole time we were sending those out, we were also telling people, if this rips, we're going to replace it for you for free. We had a manufacturing issue. We don't know exactly how many of the shoes were impacted or which lines. We know it was more of the wide sizes that we have and more of the new colors, but we really don't know. Anyway, so I mean, that was just a disaster. I mean, because every day I was sending free shoes out to people, and even when I wasn't sending the free shoes, it was like, if they were buying something from the second order, I was sending them a pair of shoes that it was like, I don't know if this is going to last you as long as I'm committed to making a shoe of that quality for you. And so we've been ultra sensitive, just taking care of our customers, doing everything we can to build a community of raving fans, despite the fact that we knew we were disappointing some people because we disappointed ourselves. I mean, there was just nothing we could do. They just botched the order, and they've actually made us whole. And the shipment that is coming now. They've replaced all the impacted shoes for us for free, which is a bare minimum. But I mean, that's been a real headache for a long time because we want to make our customers happy. It goes against everything we're trying to do to have that situation.
So with the market being so polluted with all the major players and having to navigate something massive like that at the beginning of production, what made you keep going anyways? Was it the entrepreneurship that's already been ingrained in you? Because the market is now a little bit polluted. You are now navigating one of your early shipments that has a big manufacturing defect. What made you say, I'm going to go through and do this anyways?
The die is cast. I'm doing this, I mean, we're going to, and I think, so there's an excellent quote. I've been reading, technical difficulty here. Sorry, I've been. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've been reading, both because of my day job that I kind of have been and was doing all for years leading up to launching Montis, and for Montis, I've been reading a bunch of founders books of just like people that founded companies and of consumer businesses specifically. I don't really care about SaaS, all the sexy tech companies. It's like whatever. I love consumer businesses and products that people touch and feel and that impact their lives. And there's an amazing Sam Walton quote in his book about founding and building Walmart. And it's so stupidly simple, but man, I think it's powerful. He says, people have always asked me, what was the secret? How did you build this amazing business? Like, what was the key to your success? And he says, and the guy who narrates the book kind of sounds like this, it's like exactly what you think Sam Walton from Bentonville, Arkansas sounds like.
I love that.
He goes, I mostly just tell them, well, mostly we just got after it and then stayed after it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really, I think entrepreneurship and building a business is pretty much as simple as problem solving and stick-to-itiveness. You're solving problems for your customers. You're solving problems for your operation. And then you just dry rinse, repeat. It's like, I want to make my customers happy. What do they need to be happy? Okay, I need to get them this thing. Okay, how do I get that thing? How do I get it here? How do I build it? What do I price it at? Okay, is this making my customers happy? No, now I got to change something. And so, I mean, I think that's maybe part of it. I just, like I said, the same driving forces. I love pickleball. We had that issue and it really was discouraging. I mean, it went from every day getting the Shopify notification on my phone, cha-ching, to making me really happy, to making me like so depressed. Like, oh, another free pair we're sending. That means somebody's pissed and we're replacing this for them.
You're like, F this.
Yeah. Honestly, some days it feels that way, but just that's kind of what it is. I think I'm committed to this business. I'm committed to building something that lasts, and so we're gonna problem solve for ourselves, for our customers, and we're gonna do whatever we need to do to build a community of raving fans. Going to get after it and stay after it, like Sam Walton said. One thing that was really interesting that came after that is we have, if you go look through the reviews on our website, we have amazing 5-star reviews, and a lot of those reviews specifically mention our customer service, because we've just been so committed to just like, we are going to make these people happy. And so a lot of them are like, we have probably quite a handful of reviews that are like, yeah, I got a pair of shoes. It lasted like a week and then it broke. And then they gave me another one for free. And that also lasted a week and then it broke. And then they gave me another one for free. And this one's good. Amazing customer service, 5 stars. And I'm just like, that person left us a 5-star review saying they gave me 2 defective products in a row. And it's like, oh, that's painful for me to read. But also, like, we've managed to make a lot of people happy despite that problem that we had along the way.
I think that's the reason I love you using that story is because the whole narrative of failure as a whole is fail, learn, apply what you learned, repeat, right? And I think the biggest point there that you emphasize is that business as a whole is an infinite game, right? Many people talk about like the infinite game versus the finite game. If you're getting involved in business in the entrepreneurship journey and you think it's finite, meaning there's an end to it, you're in it for the wrong reasons. Absolutely. So, with it being an infinite game, has capital ever become a problem for you? Because I feel like that's the main issue that stops entrepreneurs is that when they run into problems, when they run into defects, the thing that usually puts them out of that infinite game is capital.
Totally. Yeah, I love what you're saying about the infinite game. I mean, it's reminiscent of the Jeff Bezos I think it's 90 or whatever year it was, shareholder letter that's like Amazon is a day one company, and we will always be a day one company, never a day two company. When we become a day two company, we'll fail. That notion is really interesting. But capital, so yes, it's a problem. Our company is bootstrapped. We funded it ourselves. So my brother, between my brother and my dad's business and we put all the money up to start the company. And so far, I mean, we haven't taken a dime out. We're doing it without taking any money out of the business. And so far, it has only been a cycle of putting more money in. I'm in the process of setting up a line of credit that will allow us to make bigger orders up front and then have the debt lie with the business entity so we can pay that debt down and renew it. Because I think for our most recent order, I think I made a loan to the company myself, and it just keep putting. My wife came with me to the bank and she was very depressed on the way home, and I'm like, "Hey, we're gonna get it right back. Don't worry." So far, it's just been a suck of money and time. But I mean, on an accounting basis, we are profitable. But because we are growing and we have to pay for the shoes before we sell the shoes, there's this gap. Our working capital is a problem, and so we, yeah, I mean, it's a problem. I think luckily we've been in a position where so far we've sort of just barely had enough within the business to keep paying, and where we haven't, I've had enough money of my own to make a loan to the company and then pay myself back before our next order, is how we've kind of operated it. But I'm hoping once we have this line of credit, we'll be done with that at least, and the company will be able to kind of fund it within itself. So, yeah, I mean,
Are you still working your day job?
I am, yeah. So the
So
way we have
what?
it set up is
Yeah,
I funded probably 70% or 65% of the costs of starting the company, and my dad and my brother's business put in 35%. But then we split the equity more in favor of them. It's like 55-45 because my brother is managing most of the day to day, and I still
gotcha.
have a full time job that I'm playing hooky from this afternoon, and then I'm just doing everything that I do on nights and weekends because my brother is doing a lot of our customer function, so he's the one that's curating those great reviews, that's dealing with people. He has more patience than I do. I'm more prone to emotional outburst, so it's better that he deals with the customers. um, and and then what we do is uh, my wife and I have managed all of the uh, distribution and fulfillment of the product. So we're in the process of moving into a 3PL, a mega warehouse that's going to do all of our fulfillment for us. But right now, I can walk you down to my basement. My basement's full of pickleball shoes, like overflowing. That's just how we've been doing it so far. Um, and so we're in the process of moving into a 3PL, getting a line of credit set up, and then we're going to like really look like a little bit more of a real company. My brother is working mostly full time in the business, and I'm working, I mean, maybe full-time hours, but outside of 9 to 5 sort of thing on the company.
What do you do?
And
What do you do full time outside of the company?
so I work for a global mutual fund company that maybe it was. This is part of the backstory of why Montis and how we got here. But so
Mm.
we the company I work for invests in publicly traded stocks all over the world. So 80% of our investments are outside the United States, 20% are in the US. And for the 11 years that I have worked there, I've covered consumer. So I work on our consumer team. So any business we invest in that is a restaurant, retailer, apparel company, anything else, I manage those investments, and I'm sort of like our lead analyst on those investments.
This makes sense now.
So that's part of the part of the backstory of like why Montis is like I've spent my career studying businesses and trying to pick out which ones are good. And I love I love my day job. I love that aspect about it. It's really fun. I've learned, I mean, I know more about like cosmetics companies in Korea than you would ever guess, or the hotel industry in South Africa. Like it's really just interesting stuff like that that I just kind of get to learn. But the thing that I have always disliked about it is I've always felt like a little bit one layer removed from the action, where I love that I get to learn a lot or whatever, but what I don't love so much is that I feel like sometimes it'd be fun to just go be a business person rather than try to figure out who's a better business person, the CEO of that company or that one. And so that's part of why like I have through my job an extensive experience and knowledge about like what good businesses do in consumer, and what like mega sized companies have, what their supply chains look like, what risks. I mean, part of the job is we have one-on-one meetings with like CEOs and CFOs where I just am asking them questions and they're answering them about their business. But it's not CEOs and CFOs of companies like Montis. It's CEOs and CFOs of companies like Puma and Under Armour and Adidas and Nike and Skechers and Asics, and it's like big businesses. So that's been a really valuable experience, I think, in building what I want Montis to be, is having the target of like, okay, what do the businesses that have been mega successful down the road look like, and how can we kind of build systems that will scale?
So from a leadership standpoint, then I didn't think we were going to go here, but I'm going to ask the question anyways. From a leadership standpoint, with having to have so many conversations with major CEOs, like you said, Puma, Nike, what have you recognized that are like characteristics that you're like, this is something that I need to apply to Montis in order to get to this level?
It's really interesting when you talk to CEOs of publicly traded companies, it becomes abundantly obvious within a couple of minutes which of them are in the weeds of their business and which of them are not. And
Tell me how you know that.
well, because when you ask them questions, they know the specific answers. They know, they don't say, well, I'll get back to you. Let me think. I think it's this. They know, no, the incremental returns on capital that we're getting when we open a new store in Vancouver are better than the incremental returns on capital we're getting when we open a new store in the United States. So we're going to keep going in Vancouver, and we're going to, so we're going to use a hub and spoke model versus whatever. And, they're in the weeds. And I don't even necessarily think that you should take that as an explicitly good or bad thing, because there's also some leaders that can be really good at delegating, right? One of the best things I've read, I can't remember where I originally heard this, but really, really great leaders are not afraid to hire people that are smarter than they are, right? And there's kind of this
Absolutely.
weird business politicking thing that people sometimes do, where it's like, oh, this person's awesome, but like I'm a little worried they're going to take my job soon if I hire them. But it's like, no, like if you're like a really great business person and a leader, you're building a team around you of experts that are going to just knock it out of the park at what they're tasked to do. But it is interesting to note, as like from the perspective of an investor, that like uh, you you do realize pretty quickly like which CEOs are like really up to speed on the details and which ones are not. And I would say that generally it's a good thing for them to be able to know the details, because especially the level of detail that we are asking them when we have those sorts of meetings is probably like they should know that, even if they are sort of a hands off, I'm going to hire and delegate leader, because we're not like really in the weeds. We're not the type of investing we do is passive, not in the sense of like an ETF passive, but passive in the sense of we don't like take over control of a company and replace the CEO. We'll
Gotcha.
buy like 5% of the shares or something or less, and then just let them do their thing. Um, so we're not like getting under the hood in a certain sense and like telling them what to do. Um,
Full hostile takeover.
yeah, that's not the game that I'm involved in the day to day, but it is interesting. So I would say that, I mean, just understanding the details of their business, and probably more importantly, really understanding the culture of their business. I like to ask them. I like to ask CEOs a lot of questions about like hiring and employees and just like how they approach that, and that often also becomes really clear. Like the ones that have a clear vision for who they will hire and who they won't and why. I think that's really important for a company to have a very clear identity, that they can stick with and have some discipline, especially on the people and culture side of things.
Do you find that the culture varies significantly uh, between the companies that are successful on their own, or do you find that the culture is very similar across those different industries?
That's interesting. That's an interesting question because uh, I mean I think every company certainly has very different cultures and identities
Mm.
and what they look like. They're different. But I would say that all the companies that I'm talking to, for the most part, I mean, by the measure of me and Montis today, have been massively successful, right? I mean, we're talking about companies that are, mostly like at least $100 million market cap. Most of them are in the billions, and so they're companies that are doing like hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars in revenues. So they've been successful on some level. But it is interesting that often when companies fail, when things start to deteriorate and go wrong, uh, it's usually starts with the culture, because culture is a powerful thing, and if you have a really strong culture that is centered around the specific wow factor for what you're trying to bring to your customers, that's really powerful. But when you start to lose sight of that, um, it can be problematic. It's really interesting. I read in Chip Wilson, the founder of Lululemon's book, he talks a lot about a period of time when they had some private equity investors come in, and they were constantly getting in fights with him about what he wanted to do, and he's convinced that if they had done it his way instead of their way, the company would be, triple the size that it is today, or was at the time he was writing the book. Obviously Lulu has been a massive success story, but he's convinced that like they sort of got away from the fundamental like cultural, what is Lulu and who is the Lulu customer, that was like I can't remember the vernacular he uses, but the modern super women, right, where you have a career and you're going to go to yoga and you're making money on your own, but you're doing this, and it was a cultural sort of evolution in the beginning, um, that he was just so passionate about sticking to. And they definitely had some bumps in the road. I mean, they got away on that. They had some serious issues at some point with their product quality. They had a whole few-year period where they were making the stretchy pants were too thin and too stretchy, and they became see-through. It was like a whole thing. But
And then there's the whole thing, and we don't have to get onto this topic, but there's the whole topic of like microplastics, how they're affecting your body, what apparels they're contained in, etc.
yeah,
Um, but the key point in there that I want to emphasize that you were spot on with And I'm emphasizing this because also just spoke with Ken Herman, the founder of the APP Tour.
Hmm.
And his quote, which I loved, was he said, "If I'm the dumbest person in the room, I am a happy man and a happy leader."
Yeah.
And the reason I want to emphasize that is because even in my, you talked about delegation, even in my journey on this, you want to feel like you need to be the best at everything in order to like run a company or grow it. But it's not even close to true, right? It's if you can accumulate minds of all the best, the smartest people in these niches, whether it is, that's why you divide businesses, right, into marketing, sales, manufacturing, HR, right? If you can get the best people in all of those niches to bring together the pie or the ship as a whole, and you are sitting there listening to all these smart people, and you're like, wow, I'm the dumbest person in this room, you did a good job as a leader building a team, right?
Yeah. Totally.
I think the other quote from Steve Jobs, when they asked him like what the best product he built was, and everybody expected him to say, iPad or iPhone or the iPod, right? He said his team.
Hmm.
He was like, the best thing I ever built was my team. He was like,
That's awesome.
he was like, Apple would not be in the position that they're in today without his team. So I have a questioning for you now on the marketing side of things, because where you got to with Montis was you now have your product in your hands. But the next gap to close is like, how the F do we get people to know about this? So what was that first pivotal action that you had that got people to start knowing about Montis Pickleball?
So for sure, the step change, the big
Okay.
original one was edu.
Mm.
So we started. I mean, just reaching out to social. I mean, we started just experimenting, right? We went to tournaments. We tabled tournaments. We started sending DMs to pickleball influencers, to pros, to whoever we could find, and just said, "Hey, let me send you a pair of shoes. Tell me if you like
Mm.
it, whatever. And if you like it, maybe we can do something together." And so we just sort of gave away a couple hundred pairs of shoes, and we're just like, let's find who are the right people to give these to. And uh, Edu, I found a YouTube video that Edu made in 2023. Who you can see his YouTube channel, Edu Pickleball YouTube. He's on YouTube and Instagram, and he made a video in 2023 that was like, hey, the best pickleball shoes for 2023 or something like that. And it was like a review of 10 different brands of pickleball shoes. I sent him a DM on his Instagram and I said, hey man, you're missing one. It's better than all those. Let me tell you about this new shoe, Montis, something like that. Can I send you a pair to try it out? And he was like, yeah, sure. Here's the address. So I sent it to him, and that was kind of where it started. And he was kind of like, whatever, sure, send me. Because it's like he had 30,000 followers at the time. I think he's like closer to 50, 100 between the two channels now. But
Yeah, he's crushing it.
yeah, but he originally, uh, he was like, well, he was getting products sent to him all the time, obviously, and I'm sure he still is. And so he said that to us, he was like, I didn't really have, expectations. I never do. It's like, whatever, I'll try it. But then a week later, after he got the shoes and he tried them a few times, we had a call, and he said to me, he was like, I can't believe how much I love your shoes. And he raved about it. He's like, he was like, your shoe is actually like, I genuinely love it. It's an amazing shoe. And so we before we even made any formal, like, well, I mean, not informal, but before we made any like deals of like, we're gonna put him on Team Montis or pay him anything, in any sort of a recurring or guaranteed way, we he just said, let's do this. Let's just give me a link or a code that I can take a percentage of the sales or whatever, and let me just show you what I can do. And I was like, all right. So he made a video, and you can find it on YouTube still. It's called, I think the headline, it just says Montis is legit. And he posted that video, and we went from, I mean, at the time we were probably selling, I don't know. We probably were selling 10 pairs of shoes per week on our platform at the time because I mean we'd been just barely getting going, and he posted that video, and we sold $50,000 that first month after he posted the video. We did $50,000 in
Wow.
sales, and it was like that's what put us on the map, you know. And from there, it's had some ebbs and flows, but it's like that was a step change, you know. It's like we went from, I don't know if anybody even knows who we are or what we do, to like, okay, we have 4,000 customers now, you know, at the end of the year after, and that was whatever it was 8 months ago. Um, so I mean, that was definitely like the first, like, I mean, okay, I look at it now and I'm like, if we sell less than 5 in a day or 10 pairs in a day, it's like I'm like really sad, you know. It's a disappointing day. But I I I look at it now and I'm like, there's still a ton of room to grow because 10 pairs a day is really not that many. But I mean, considering at this time last year I was doing one a week, it's like, okay, I'll take it. You know, it was when we very first launched it, kind of a little over a year ago.
The one that is highly impressive to grow at the rate that you guys have in just a year. But two, did that really open your eyes to like why influencer marketing, as they call it, is so much leverage for any small business or really any business as a whole?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. The thing that's been kind of curious about it is like, because we've had a few others that we've gone back and forth with, some who have followings that are, you know, almost as big as his or just as big as his, and they just haven't done it for us. You know,
Mm.
it's really interesting. Something about Ed's channel. I mean, he has a really great, authentic, organic channel, and it's like he mentions the word Montis, and people are like, "Oh, I'm going to try those shoes out," you know. But there has been a few others that we haven't had as much success for. So I think to answer your question, yes, it's, I mean, it's powerful. Influencer marketing is a powerful thing. Part two answer, you have to figure out the right fit. And I don't
Mm.
know, I still am not quite sure if we've dialed that formula, but
Absolutely, because it's so key on who that audience is, right? And for example, like all of Ed's audience, every single one of them is playing pickleball. Like every person that is following him because they play pickleball and are trying to get better at pickleball.
yeah,
So if your audience is a little bit more diverse, I'll say too drastically in one area or another, absolutely you're going to get lower conversions. However, uh, even like that was eye opening for me in comparison to why some of even the biggest brands are turning to like micro influencers rather than going and doing large deals on TV, because they know that that audience is 100% their target consumer, right?
yeah,
So for them, if they're going to get 10,000 people of their target consumer guaranteed, rather than going and doing a TV ad where maybe it's 5 to 10% of the audience, if it's 100,000 people for round numbers, like that's a maybe. That's kind of like they kind of know the numbers. You'll probably get this percentage of the population that's watching. However, for them to go to a micro influencer who's like, this is their specific niche, it's a no brainer. Absolutely a no brainer.
yeah, yeah. The way the public executives all talk about it is, uh, they get higher ROI from the micro influencers, but it's more difficult to scale, obviously, because you
Mm,
have to find a lot of them, and finding the right ones isn't
exactly.
always easy. But when you do find the
Hmm.
right ones, the ROI on those investments is a lot higher than like, let's go spend $1 million on a TV ad or something, for sure.
You know what? I didn't consider that gap, meaning actually finding because you think about like, oh, it's so easy to go on social media and find people, but finding the right ones actually
It's, I mean, the
is
right
very
type of
challenging.
content that they're going to
Yeah,
make, you know, the right, well, and just, I mean, for in the context of like a public company, it's like they're just already so big that in order for something to move the needle for them, they have to go find they can't just find, they have to go find 10,000 different influencers. They can't just find one really good
Mm,
one, and have that. It doesn't move the needle unless it's like a lot. And so that's maybe part of it.
which makes total sense. Um, so I got a couple more questions for you. So one of them is more or less geared around like unconventional strategies. And the reason that I say that is because you have a deeper background from the way that you grew up, but many entrepreneurs diving into the space don't necessarily fully know what they're doing. And I mean, everybody does it when they step on this journey to a certain extent. And you find like there's like unconventional strategies that like, wow, you're like, this kind of worked, right? Was there anything that, or a specific strategy that you tried that was unconventional that you were like, you know what, let's give this a shot, and it happened to work out better than you actually anticipated?
That's really interesting. I want to think about it for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the answer is we haven't tried enough unconventional things yet, because it's like the fact
Yeah.
that I can't answer that well makes me think like I probably need to think outside the box a little more.
Mm,
Ed has been the one that has really surprised us on the upside.
mm,
We've tried a few other things, and maybe I would say I actually have an answer on the opposite that has been a very conventional thing that we have tried that has been a very large, mostly failure. Not that big, but we've spent a lot. My brother, no, I've managed it, but I've spent quite a bit of time on pro sponsoring and
yeah.
finding the right pros and trying to sponsor people. And uh, if any of our pros are watching this, I love you, but I think a lot of it has been a colossal waste of time. Uh,
Mm,
I think if we had taken all the money and time and energy that we spent on pros and just thrown it at like Facebook ads, we probably would be way ahead of where we're at today. Is my suspicion, uh, and I mean, I think it gives our brand some really great credibility, right? Like we have some real top pros. I have multiple people have beaten Ben Johns wearing our shoes, in a couple different occasions. So that's like kind of fun and cool. And we've got a bunch of APP and PPA wins, and people that have worn our shoes and won the tournament. So that gives us some nice credibility. I think I pay way more attention to pro pickleball than 90% of people who play pickleball. So I think I way have over indexed the importance of that. Even though it's like, I know the viewership is not where it is for other sports or whatever, but it's like, I just think it's probably been mostly a waste of time. It's fun, but so that's the opposite of your question. That is a conventional thing we have tried that has not been effective.
beyond the viewership standpoint, because that is a major hurdle, and that's something that is a little bit out of your control and mine. Um, do you feel like it's because many of the pro players have not really established a social media influence? Like it's almost like they're dabbling in it, but not necessarily making it actually a part of their brand.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, there's a few that have. I mean, like I said, we have a great partnership with Martin and Tammy Emmerich, and they've got
Mm,
in the thousands of a following, and they're pretty active on social, and they've been great, and they've also been very gracious. Just like they talk to people about our shoes a lot. They tell they spread the good word for us, and that's great. But yeah, just from like a standpoint of like, I think if you're not Ben Johns and you're not Annalie Waters, nobody cares
not
what you're, like mostly nobody cares what you're playing with or how and it's like, there's probably not just those two. There's probably like maybe 10, that you could put on
mm,
that list. But even then, I had a conversation with a guy he's running a club back east, and he used to be highly involved with some of the top pros and negotiating their contracts with brands and sort of acting as an agent. And he as the guy who was negotiating contracts with brands for some of the top 10 pros out there, he said to me, yeah, I think none of them are worth what the brands are paying them. And I was like, that's kind of what I think too. Like, I think in terms of like the ROI today, maybe 10 years from now, it'll be there, but it's just
Mm.
not there. Nobody cares about, in terms, if you look at everyone who plays pickleball enough to need shoes for pickleball and measured like how much they care about pro pickleball, for most of them, it's like closer to 0 than to 10. It's like, it's not like a thing that people really are that active in today. I mean, it's growing obviously, and I think it will continue to become more important to the sport. But today, it's from a perspective of like, where do I invest my marketing dollars and my time?
Mm.
I think it's a mistake we've made probably to spend as much as we have, or as much as I have, on that piece to the puzzle.
I forget about it too because I'm watching film every day, right? Beyond playing, I'm watching film every day. So I know all of the players, even in like the qualifiers from playing in them. I know the players from the
Yeah.
qualifiers all the way up into the 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeds, right? So for me, I'm thinking of all these talents, but what I forget is that not as many people are actually watching as I believe that they are.
If the
And
numbers are true, if 40 million people played pickleball last year, okay, let's say only one third, like maybe only 8 million of those played like multiple times, or played once a month.
yeah,
It's like, okay, out of those, or let's just say five, if there's 5 million people that played pickleball, 6 times minimum last year, how many of them care or follow professional pickleball? Maybe 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. I don't know. It's not a million. I don't think it's a
which
million.
is which is crazy to consider because I remember looking at these numbers in like 2022 and I was trying to figure out like what direction I really wanted to go with the business and the podcast as a whole. And I was comparing it to golf at the time. So golf was already having 6 million new players year over year, and pickleball was already at 10 million new players year over year. I was like, this is going to blow up. Obviously, then it went to 30, and now it's at 40 million. I cannot wrap my brain around the fact that beyond pickleball TV, which is relatively new, that you're only getting 3 to 10,000 people watching pro matches on YouTube. It doesn't make sense to me. However, I'll tell you from a player standpoint, and this is where like I'm kind of maybe seeing a gap here, is that the way you're watching the game in person. So like if I go and watch the top pros in person, it is completely different than when I'm watching it on TV. So my logic is at least the gap between in-person experience and the experience that you're seeing on TV is too large.
Hmm.
So where other sports have condensed it to try and bring you like closer to the game, in on the action, really getting the action from you sitting on the couch, you just don't have that element watching pickleball because you can't see the spin that the players are putting on it. You can't tell the speed of the ball, right? You have no idea how hard they're hitting it, how fast their hands are. All
Yeah.
of those like intrinsic details get taken out of the actual watching it. So somebody goes and watches it for the first time when they've partnered with ESPN or Fox or CBS Sports. Even though those productions are pretty good, you're not getting that element out of it. So my hey, problem solution brain from engineering, it's like if the problem is like bringing them closer to the game, like the solution needs to be how can we bring them as close to this game as possible.
Hmm.
Me, completely different note. I'm thinking of like a bowl arena, like
Hmm.
Colosseum Roman style, where you're
Yeah.
elevated above it and you have this camera going 360 degrees around it. Just like you're in the action all the time from every angle. That's how I can think about that. But unfortunately, I am not the founder of the PPA or the APP or any other league that has started. So maybe I'll submit a comment for review to one of them.
Yeah, I think they'd probably yeah. Anyways, there's a lot we can say, I guess, on that, but
Yeah.
there's a lot to the production value. I mean, they're improving, but my goodness, like some of them are great. sometimes it's like I can't watch with the audio on because I don't want to hear what the announcer is saying. The comment, whoever they have
Abs-
comment. How can you? It's like they can't resist, and I won't say any names, but they he can't resist talking about himself. Well, when I hit forehands, let me tell you, I'm like, dude, you're like a 4 or 5. Just shut up. No, like we're watching pro pickleball. Like, get freaking out of here. Like, well, I was doing this. I'm just like, oh my gosh, why are you talking about yourself again? Like, how often do you see a guy on ESPN like, well, I do this a lot, and let me tell you about myself, and I want to talk about me some more. I'm like, shut up, please. Gosh. Sorry, that's my emotional
like
outburst on that. But
no, but they need to that point. Like I'll use the NFL reference. When you have someone like Tony Romo or Greg Olson actually does a really good job on it, or Tom Brady now, who sees the game so well,
Mhm.
sitting and commentating. That's the value of like they just did something, and you're telling the audience why that just happened, and
Yeah,
they're
and,
like,
and if they
"Oh,
start talking about themselves, like, well, when I was playing professionally, this is how I would be thinking about it in this situation. It's like great, but it's like until Ben Johns retires and he's the guy sitting do you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like we don't need to hear this like random old dude that like
nah,
anyway.
give me the like La Liga announcers that are just like hyping up every play, right, and
Yeah.
every goal."
If you're just gonna pick some
I'm
random person, at least pick someone like that. That's like exciting. Like, oh
exactly.
my gosh, I can't believe he sped that one up again and he got it, baby. Let's go. That
Ah,
was a terrible
golazo!
decision, but it paid off.
That's what they need, right?
Yeah.
They kind of need that hype and entertainment around it to put it on a map or something silly like that. Um,
Yeah.
so wrapping us up a little bit, and then we'll have like 2 closing questions, and we'll get there. But with the foundation now really set for Montis, because that kind of seems where you guys are. You have this solid foundation underneath you. What's the next big vision for Montis Pickleball? Like, where are we going?
So we are ready to start investing in marketing.
Mm,
To this point, we have done very little, right? Like I said, so we've had a small, modest pro sponsorship program where we're not paying anybody very much, and we're not making a very big investment. And then on the other side of things, we haven't really been willing to make any large investments in like the influencer thing. Like with Ed, we mostly started, and we rearranged it a little bit, but it's like we're mostly paying variable stuff to people, right? So like we'll give you set you up with a link if it works, great. But to this point, we have not made like a big brand investment and just like we're gonna go show people who Montis is and what it is. So there's a few components. We're launching uh, in I don't know when this is going to air, but in March, beginning of March, end of February, we've got some new colorways coming out, and that's going to be exciting. And we will have at that point more inventory on hand than we've ever had before. And as I was saying before, we're going to have a line of credit set up, so we're ready to buy more when we need to, and we're ready to spend some money on marketing ahead of the sale. So we'll be financially in a position to step on the gas, and then we're going to do that. So the colorways are going to come out. We're going to start really pushing on more just advertising on social channels. So we'll probably do some more influencer stuff, but we're also just going to run ads on social that we've had some success with, but we've just sort of been experimenting. We haven't really started to put money behind any of them. So we're going to do that. And then we have an amazing uh, videographer, uh, director. He's a director. Videographer is not even a good enough word that we partner with. He plays some pro qualifier pickleball. His name is Dylan Cato.
I
Dylan,
know,
sorry,
I know who
you
he
know
is.
Dylan? Is
That
it? I don't know.
he
If his
does
name
great.
is Cato or Cato. Actually, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. I
So
should
I
ask
don't
him.
know him. I don't know him personally, but obviously, me being in the content creation
Yeah,
space, I follow him because he does a fabulous job.
yeah. And so he has his YouTube channel, the non pickleball one. That's like, I mean, he's got 100,000 followers on YouTube because he directs these incredible films. So he and I spent a day together and shot some stuff. He's making sort of a founder's story sort of video where that's going to help set the tone for our brand and who we are and what we want to do.
I love that.
I'm really excited to see what he comes up with there. It probably won't be that good because I'll be in it too much, but he'll make it look pretty good with his skills. Um, but so that's going to be really great. And we've got some other stuff in the works that we're going to make a couple more videos with him that sort of really set the tone for like who Montis is as a brand. And then we're going to put some real money behind pushing those videos out to people. So those are the big exciting things. And I mean, I hope, I hope we can sell, I don't know, a few $1 million worth of shoes this year. If we can sell 10, 20, 30,000 pairs of shoes, that would be a great year. And I think that's realistic for us if we push in the right places. Obviously, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of, I mean, all the big brands that don't have a shoe are in the process of making a shoe. But I think we can do a better job than them. And I think we're more authentic than all the tennis brands that are just trying to transplant. So I think we have a real authentic pickleball message that is going to resonate with customers of being a shoe that is democratic, a shoe that is for pickleball, a shoe that is as quality as the high brand, the tennis brands, but we're not going to sell you a shoe for $150. We're going to sell it for $109, and it's going to be just as good as what they're selling you. So really excited about that.
I'm excited for you. You just hyped me up. You sold me on it right there and then.
Great.
The question that I have for you in kind of alluding to the marketing half, were you able over this past year to determine your ROAS, your return on ad spend? Because I think that's where a lot of brands are like, okay, I need to market a product, I need to advertise it, but don't necessarily understand like how much or even how little in order to get any return from it. So how did you really determine that, or have you?
Well, yeah, I would say the shorter answer is we still haven't determined that.
Yeah.
And for two factors. One, we're doing it. We're trying to do it right now. Like we've been dabbling. We're spending money on a bunch of different channels. I mean, the cost per, our customer acquisition cost, it has varied. I mean, we've always been first order profitable with what we've spent online, so that's great. And that
Really
also does not account for the LTV, right? That's just for first order profitable. But 30% of my sales in the last few months are to existing customers. We've only been around a year, and a third of the sales I'm making are people that have come back to us. So that's really great.
For anybody listening, LTV, only because we haven't dove into this before, just long-term value, meaning like how many pairs are they actually going to buy over a period of time? If it's 5 years, 10 years, etc., what's the total value that he's going to get out of it? Just wanted to jump in there in case anybody was listening
For
and
sure.
wondering why.
Yeah, so like on average, if we spend, but we're seeing our acquisition cost. I mean, it's interesting. On one channel with one ad, we were seeing 10 cents a click. And if we have 10
Okay.
cents a click and a 3 to 4% conversion rate in our website, like that's unbelievably good. It's not realistic. I think it's wrong. But like we've seen, anything range from like, I don't know, $30 of ad spend to acquire a new customer down to like single digit dollars. So we really are trying to lock it in and see which channels work the best and which ones we can actually scale on. But the problem is we don't have a ton of data because to this point, our problem has not been marketing. Our problem has been having enough money to buy more shoes. So we were like, well, rather than spend the incremental dollar on more advertising, let's just spend it on buying more inventory because we know we're going to sell it anyways. But we're gonna be flush with inventory pretty soon here with the shipment we have on the water now, and then we'll be ready to start spending some more on marketing. And so, the short answer is I don't really know, but what we are seeing so far is pretty encouraging.
The reason I really asked the question was because you were going to either give me the answer of how you found the numbers or that you're currently in the process of doing it. And I think we found over and over again a lot of feedback being like afraid to spend money, not knowing what the ROI, the return on investment was going to be, or what the return on ad spend was going to be. And what you just emphasized is like, you just got to kind of do it and figure out what those conversion numbers actually look like, or else you're just never going to know. Right. So, following into our last questions, the first one you're gonna have to give thought to every single one of these. So, if you need to take a second. So, the first one is going to be is if someone was writing a book on your life and Montis Pickleball, what would you want the last chapter to say?
Whew. That's a big question.
Yeah.
So I have this vision, and I alluded to this a minute ago. Um, the video that I want to have Dylan make for us, that I'm going to talk. I haven't told him these details yet, so maybe he'll find them here first. But he's still editing the last one we did. But um, it speaks to who I want us to be as Montis. And I also spoke to our pricing, right? We've deliberately built a shoe that's as good as anything on the market, but priced it at the low end because we want to match culturally with the democratic nature of pickleball.
Mm.
Pickleball is a sport that people of different genders, people of different ages, people of different races, people different political ideologies can come together and just screw around and have a good time, and it's fun, right? Like it's like pickleball is a unifying thing in many sense, and people of different like socioeconomic groups can, and you often do because it's the culture is you show up at a public park and you might have a billionaire from the east side of the freeway and a poor minimum wage person from the west side of the freeway. They show up at the same public park to drop in and they set their paddles on the fence next to each other, and so I want Montis to just culturally speak to who pickleball is at its soul. And the video that I want to have Dylan make, that I think maybe just envisioning this is the answer to your question of what I want people to think about my life and Montis together. I don't know why, for some reason. I guess I've just seen it there. So there's a lot of Polynesian culture in Utah and Polynesians here in Salt Lake City, and it's really big in the pickleball. The Polynesian community has really embraced pickleball as well, and so it's like you go to public parks, and I just have this vision for a video of like a 85-year-old Samoan guy and like a 10-year-old white girl, and they step onto the pickleball court, and they're rivals. Like they develop this like this friendship where they're like trying to beat each other. And I can just picture Dylan making a phenomenal video of like one day the guy wins, and then he's kind of like, oh, try again next year, little girl. And then one day the girl wins and she's like, oh, too slow, old man, or whatever. And they kind of go back and forth, and it's like they're each sort of conquering their own podium, and their podium is, I'm gonna beat that freaking old guy at the park, or I'm gonna beat that freaking little girl that I keep losing to, or whatever it is. And then they kind of come together, and they're laughing, and maybe she eventually beats him, and he's not going to beat her again because she's gotten too good, and it's like, oh well, great job, it's been that sort of just the togetherness that comes from the rivalry of conquering. We've toyed around with the idea of like Montis, means mountain in Latin, as we said. What's your mountain? And maybe for the little girl, her mountain is to go beat that old guy that she just can't quite beat. Or maybe it's your friend who annoys you sometimes because they're so good, or your brother-in-law, or whoever it may be. It's like there's something to that. Like we all have our own little thing that we're trying to accomplish with pickleball, but that's the beauty of it, is that it's just an accessible game for all people. And so if someone was to write a book about my life and Montis, it has something to do. I would feel sad if it didn't say something about the obvious nature that we were able to tie Montis to what pickleball is already at its core, which is a sport that brings people together and that is accessible to everyone. And I think that's what's really important to me.
Chef's kiss on that answer. That's all I have to say. I absolutely love it. That resonates with me heavily, by the way. Last two questions. The first one, and I think you already explained this a little bit, but I'll ask it again anyways. and you could just say, you know what, I'm thankful for that one. Um, what is one failure that you had that you're thankful for today?
Specific to Montis?
Specific? No, you could use anyone.
I'll tell you right now.
Mm.
Well, there's probably some others, but so my sophomore year of high school, I was on the tennis team, and um, we were fine. You know, we were a pretty good team. We had one guy on the team that went on to play at the University of Utah and have a really successful career, was really good. And then we had another guy that was a dear friend of mine who was really a great player. So we had two like the players that had been like real competitive for a long time, and then I don't know, just a bunch of guys that kind of had dabbled, and like that was me. And so I was playing the I don't know how it works. I guess it's a little different probably in every state, but the way it works in Utah, you have three singles players that typically would be your three best players, and then you have two doubles teams. So the varsity tennis team would be 7 players, and I was playing number 2 doubles. So I was the worst player on varsity my sophomore year. You know, that was my partner and I. And we did okay during the year. You know, I mean, like I said, we weren't super competitive, but we we made the state tournament, and then we lost in straight sets in the first round to a team from Timpview High School here in Utah. I went to a school called Highland, but Timpview was the real dominant force in high school tennis for like a decade here. They're they had some players that like were played at BYU, and their coach, the coach of the team, had some players that were his sons all played at BYU, and so they were. I mean, they were really really good program. But so that the end of my sophomore year, I mean, that was a failure. I mean, not that I went into that year expecting to win state, because I hadn't really like, but it was like, man, first round, like that's pretty pathetic, you know. Like, come on, at least make the quarterfinals or something, you know. I'm playing number 2 doubles. It's like the worst players on the teams of the varsity schools, you know. Um, so, but that sort of lit a fire in me. I I went home, and the very next week, I said I quit football. So I'd been playing football on the football team, and I went into the coach of the football, and I said, "Coach, I'm done. I'm sorry, but I gotta focus on tennis, and I'm gonna go all in on tennis." And I went up to my parents and I said, "I'm gonna play tennis every single day between now and next year, and I'm gonna win a state championship. I'm not gonna do that again." And I did. So I started. I mean, I started playing literally from the week after the state tournament my sophomore year. I played tennis 2 to 3 hours a day, 6 days a week for the next year. So I mean, I went from being someone who had like I dabbled here and there, and I took some group lessons, to like I'm going all in, baby. Like, you know, I was like it became my identity. I was like I'm a tennis guy, and we won. My buddy and I won state at number 2 doubles. Um, we I mean, we actually just kind of crushed everyone we played all year long. Like, it was a really, really successful year. And then, and then the next year, I did it again. My senior year, leading into my senior year, played every single day, and we played number 1 doubles, and we lost one match in the division tournament the week before state. So we got a lower seed at state, and then we went into state, played the same team the next weekend at state, annihilated them, and then won the state championship 7-6, 7-6, and 2 tiebreakers. Um,
Wow.
and so, I mean, that
Electric.
experience, yeah, that experience. I mean, looking back on it now, it's like it worked out so well, but that experience taught me so much about like work ethic and goal setting and envisioning something and trying to bring it to fruition. Um, and you know, obviously, like I said, in this case, it worked out. Like I had a goal, win state, we accomplished that goal. But by the way, we won state as we won the team title my junior year, and then we got second place my senior year. We lost by 1 point. It was very sad. But my partner and I won the number 1 doubles that year, anyways, that division. Um, but that taught me more about just sort of setting a goal. And I knew full well along the way, it was like, I don't know if Rafael Nadal's kids are going to move into the neighborhood the weekend before state and just crush everyone. Like, who knows? Like that very well could have happened. And I knew that it was not within my control exactly that I got that outcome. But what I did know is that I had control over how prepared I was, and that I could do everything within my own power. And I was committed. I mean, if I couldn't find someone to hit with or go train or drill with or play game with, I would just go hit 3 hours of serves. I have a partially torn posterior labrum in my arm, and it's probably still because of that. I hit too many serves for a few years, but I just, it taught me so much about life. What do you want? Envision it, do everything in your power to make it happen. And then maybe it works out and maybe it doesn't, but you're going to find out if it's possible if you do everything in your power.
Absolutely. And that one hits close for me because I kind of took the route of didn't apply myself as much as I know I could have. So had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder and a little bit of regret not doing that. So I was a hockey guy. And the reason that failure as a whole resonates so close to me is because when I became aware of my skill set, I crumbled under the fear of failure. Like, didn't know how to handle it. When I was just going out playing freely all the time. And as soon as I've gotten all this feedback of like what I can do, how I can carry the team, yada, 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 you have all these expectations set. And I just honestly crumbled underneath them. So me knowing that I had the skill set is the personal piece of why I am so passionate about pursuing pickleball at a professional level, is because I know I have all the pieces to do it, right? It's just that I didn't apply myself then. So now it's like I now love the process of applying myself over and over again and learning and failing and iterating, and all of the knowledge that I've not only gained from the podcast from a business standpoint, but also from an athletic standpoint, I get to apply in real time and be like, hey, this worked for me, this didn't. And then I get to share that feedback, right? So not only from the mental side of things now, because growing up, you're like, it's all about winning. Every single part of it's about winning, win, lose, you're emotional over it, etc. Now I get to go out there and just do it because I fucking love the sport, right? And I get to apply my athletic ability and everything that I learned along the way. So that's why so many of my hours are dedicated to just learning the game as a whole and iterating and having a good time with that, and translating the same mindset to business.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So last question. And this is, what is your greatest fear moving forward?
So I have, as we spoke about, I have a full-time job that I love and I'm quite committed to. And so I'm trying to build Montis on nights and weekends. And it's like, it's killing me. Like, I don't have time to accomplish everything. My wife just had a baby. We've got our first son. He's 6 weeks old. Yeah, I think when we first spoke, it was like the day he was born. It was like I was waiting.
I didn't bring that up, but you were literally in the hospital room being like, "Hey, I'm taking this intro call, but just know I just had a baby." I'm like, congrats.
My wife and him were sleeping or something, but yeah. I mean, maybe that tells you a little bit of how much time I have on my hands. It was like I'm just squeezing it in where I can. But so I guess all I'll say is this fear, like, I have a lot of anxiety that if Montis is gonna not blow up and not work out how I know it can, it's gonna be because I haven't been willing to just quit my job so that I can dedicate 100% of my time to it. And that gives me a lot of anxiety. I mean, it's the old, I don't even know who said it. Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. It's like, yeah, what could I accomplish if I wasn't such a sissy, you know? And so maybe I'll get there. But I really do love my job, and I mean, I think there's a lot of synergy actually between. I've learned so much about building a business doing Montis that is really helpful for me and insightful from the perspective of like financially running a fund and trying to figure out which consumer businesses to invest in and what questions I should be asking of the CEOs of those businesses. But I have a lot of anxiety about like how long I can keep this up, splitting my time, and if I'm gonna not quit my job, how do I structure Montis so that it will still flourish? And we're going to have to bring in another partner or something, or I'm going to have to get to a point where I'll probably have to just make a decision that I'm going to have to take that plunge that they talk about with entrepreneurs that, should be the default, I guess, but maybe I'm too scared, or, maybe it's the golden handcuffs. I mean, it's a good job, and I work with great people that I've worked with for a decade. So it's like, I do feel some loyalty to that company. And so anyways, I don't know, I guess, I don't know if fear is the right word, but definitely anxiety. I have a lot of anxiety over that dynamic of just like, I'm not going to keep my job if I can't successfully do it. And so far I'm successfully still doing that, but there is so much low hanging fruit. I could make a list of 25 things I should do today for Montis that I just don't have the time for. And I that would probably be the case if I was doing it full time still, that you just are never going to have enough hours in a day for what you want to do. But certainly would have more if I had, didn't have a 9 to 5.
Jumping in that water, dude, it's scary sometimes for
Yeah.
sure. But to your point, I think it's a little bit too emphasized to just quit your job and jump into it and take a full bet, because ultimately nothing sinks a ship quicker than having no capital backing, right?
My day job has paid for all the shoes so far. It's like, well, that's
Exactly,
something.
exactly my point. So
Yeah.
I think there has to be that transition period. Absolutely. I mean, I went through it myself. Um, but if I didn't have the capital at the beginning to back myself, I would not be talking to you today, like right now on this podcast. So I do believe there may be something to be said on the other end of the coin of like when your back's against the wall, you're going to fricking figure out how to get it done because you have no other options. But I don't necessarily think there's a wrong answer to that. But either way, Tyler, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Man, was there a lot of insight from so many different angles, and just how genuine and transparent you are, I think speaks volume to so many people that enjoy Montis Pickleball shoes as a whole. And I think that's also, we talked heavily about culture. I think that's also why Montis Pickleball is gonna flourish into the future, because you're truly building a book of raving fans, right? Including myself. So I know we didn't get into my experience with the shoes as a whole, but I love them, right? So you're doing everything, I'll say correctly. I don't know if there is a correct direction, but you're doing pretty damn well. So thank you for being on my podcast and just sharing all of your insight and behind the scenes. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to have a bit of exposure and to speak with you. I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's fun swapping stories, and I love the whole concept of fail first, so it's great.